All right, AP World. So the very last section of Unit 7 is a Section 8 here, mass atrocities after 1900. Um, so I'm going to run through this and see if I can get this taken care of within about a half an hour or so. First of all, the term atrocities. I don't really think I have it defined here. Yeah, I do actually. There you go. You actually get a definition of it that you can write down there. And so um, this is usually going to be some kind of killing and organized mass killing that goes on, usually during wartime. Although we'll look at some examples of atrocities that happen even beyond, the world wars and a little bit more into more modern times. This includes genocide, and genocide is mass killing of people based on a lot of times race, ethnicity, or religion. This is people who are killed because of what they are and not anything in particular that they have done. Okay, and so that gets in there. So with us looking at this role that atrocities play, this is another way that that warfare and just kind of the general way of things in the 20th century are going to become much more extreme compared to the 19th, the 18th, the 17th centuries before. Warfare always a part of the picture, but as we talked about with World War II, this idea that civilians being more likely to have died in World War II than actual soldiers, that's what we're talking about with all of this. Okay, so we can look at a couple examples here before World War II, and going back to really about the kind of the World War I years. We'll talk about first of all the genocide of Armenians. Armenians being a ethnicity that existed within the Ottoman Empire, and during World War I, the Turks of the Ottoman Empire accused the Armenians of helping the Russians, who they're fighting against, helping the Russians out. And as a result of this, they round up Armenians and put them into camps and end up just shooting and killing others. Like it says there, upwards of 1.5 million Armenians die in this. And again, it's not because of anything specifically they've done. It's because the identity is to their Armenian ethnicity. And this is a genocide that to this day the Turkish government claims was not a genocide. They say that they were just legitimate wartime deaths, or that the deaths were due to disease and things like that, not by their handling of the situation, and that they brought upon these deaths on purpose. Another example of atrocity. And some use the word genocide for this as well. It takes place in Ukraine. This is going to be Russian, Ukrainian farmers, part of the Russian Empire, who resist, and then especially, I should say Russian Empire, I should be saying the Soviet Union, but who resist Joseph Stalin's collectivization efforts. When he is taking over the farms and turning them into these collectives, so that the food can then be distributed. A lot of the farmers resist this collectivization by either hiding their crops, destroying their crops, and the Soviet government responds by pretty much just kind of dropping the hammer on these people and triggering a series of famines. And you've got the figures in there. Kills up to 10 million people, and most of these being people who in terms of just kind of what part of the Soviet Union they come from Ukraine. And that also, you think about conflict that is going on right now between Russia and Ukraine, and kind of gets you into some of the historic friction between the Russian people and the Ukrainian people. Where the memories kind of stretch out, long down the road in terms of about these famines that take place in Ukraine back in the 1930s. But again, another example of a pre-World War II mass atrocities. Those are the kind of the two biggies. Once we go into World War II, the big one to talk about clearly is what comes to be known as the Holocaust. and really where we get this term genocide is developed after World War II to describe what the Nazis do in their efforts to try to eliminate the Jewish population of Europe and beyond. Hitler, in his kind of twisted view of reality, saw Jews not as a religion, he saw them as a race. For that matter, he saw Germans not as a nationality, but as a race. And so, he has imbued in him this extreme anti-Semitism that had been around for centuries. Again, Hitler doesn't invent it. He takes advantage of something that's already there. And this is going to, make up a lot of this racial. What I use there is just the ideology of Hitler and the Nazi Party. What they will do once the Nazis rise to power by the mid 1930s in Germany is they first start work to passing a bunch of laws. They call them the Nuremberg laws. And really what their laws to do is to piece by piece, step by step, remove Jewish people from German society. Basically telling that they can only work in certain professions, they can only go to certain schools. So legal segregation and really minimizing the role that Jewish people can play, with the end goal of completely eliminating them from all German society. Rules about whether non-Jews could marry Jews and all that sort of a thing. And so that's kind of where they started. And then once they get a little bit closer to the outbreak of World War II, and then especially with the outbreak of World War II, that's where the Nazis really ratchet up their war against the Jewish people. They start establishing a network of labor camps and then death camps, especially in Eastern Europe, where they are encountering higher concentrations of Jewish people. And before World War II ends, they end up killing about half of the Jewish population of Europe, and then moving on into the Soviet Union with that number of 12 million total who are killed. About 6 million of that number are Jews, and then the other 6 million is a mix of everything from prisoners of war to gypsies to Polish people. I mean, it's a mix, but the Germans, they do come frighteningly close to accomplishing their goals when it comes to what they intended to do with the Holocaust. Okay, over in the Pacific, the Japanese as well are perpetuating atrocities. The Japanese and the Germans are somewhat similar in that both of them, they both kind of see themselves as kind of the Germans refer to it as master race. And in a way, the Japanese embrace the same kind of idea in Asia. They see themselves as better than the Chinese, better than the Koreans, better than, pretty much any other Asian people. They see themselves as kind of their own, kind of this kind of Asian Pacific master race. And so the countries that Japan is going to attack and invade, they're going to apply their racial ideology as well. They'll apply this to other Asian countries that they invade. They will apply this to prisoners of war that they take during the fighting of World War II, that sort of a thing. And we can pretty much attribute, maybe not as systematic as what the Nazis put together, but still, upwards of 2.5 million. The Chinese, they estimate, they put that number higher. They believe that there were far more Chinese that died at Japanese hands than what the historical record really connects to it all. But there's no getting around the fact that the Japanese are going to commit their share of atrocities as well. And another country that has struggled with accountability when it comes to that. Germany has, they take responsibility. There are monuments all across Germany to the victims of the Nazis, and they've never shirked that responsibility. And as a nation, they still kind of feel this collective shame about what happened during World War II and with the Holocaust. Japan struggles a bit more so. Even today in Japanese schools, they tend to kind of brush around some of the worst, Japanese atrocities of World War II, and try to minimize, and try to just kind of write a lot of it off as, this is what happens in wars, people die, and, that sort of a thing. Okay. Let's see. Not all atrocities of World War II are always ascribed simply to the bad guys. All right. The reality is that the winners of World War II, the British, the Soviet Union, and the United States, were responsible for their share. If we're all agreeing on the same term or definition for atrocity, it's kind of hard to argue with that. That bombing campaign that I talked about during World War II is going to end up killing an incredibly large number of civilians. Women, kids who have no combatant role in the war. Again, the idea was to kill enough of them to try to break the fighting will of these people and get these countries to surrender, which in the Allied way of thinking would potentially spare lives. But, it never, until we get to, the dropping of atomic bombs over in Japan, we never reached that point in Germany. And as I mentioned when we were studying, I mean, that part of the war, that there's not really a lot of evidence that the bombing campaigns of the U.S. and the British, shortened the war really in any real appreciable way. And so there still are definitely hard feelings when it comes to our bombing campaigns, and the belief, amongst Germans, amongst Japanese, that we didn't need to target civilian centers the way that we did, and to rack up the number of civilians who died during the war the way that they did. Some examples of that were the firebombing of German cities like Hamburg and Dresden, and then I think I mentioned in the notes for World War II about the firebombing of Tokyo. These were dropping bombs that were specifically made to cause fires. These were not bombs that were intended for the big explosion, kind of what we think of bombs. These were what were called incendiary bombs, and they specialize in just starting all kinds of little small fires all over. And the intent of them is, to create widespread destruction as quickly as possible. And so, those three examples there, all bombing events, cities that were bombed with incredibly heavy casualties amongst the civilian population. All right. And then, our dropping of the atomic bombs on Japan, it's still to this day the only use of nuclear, atomic weaponry in a war. They've never been used again. The United States is the only country to use it. I explained to you going through World War II notes why the decision was made to do it. There are many who counter that the United States had other options in front of them that they could have utilized, that we could have simply just surrounded the Japanese islands and basically laid siege to them, just waited them out until the Japanese people finally started to run out of food and run out of, pretty much everything, and maybe forcing surrender that way. There's some who said that we should have put one of those atomic bombs on display, maybe drop it off the coast of Japan so that, the Japanese people could see, this is what we've got, this is what we're going to use against you if you don't surrender. Reality is, again, I'm not going to cast judgment myself. I'm not going to say right, wrong, or anywhere in the middle. You can figure that one out on your own. But the reality is, we still use those two weapons to end the war in the Pacific. And the use of those bombs is seen by some as an example of atrocity. Okay. Never again was kind of this mantra that came out of the end of World War II, especially with the discovery of the death camps that the Nazis had set up, these camps where, Jewish people were either worked to death or just immediately sent to gas chambers where they were gassed and then their bodies cremated. Never again was this pretty much that, never again can the world community allow something like this to happen. and was some of the motivation in awarding Israel to the Jewish people as kind of a safe haven after World War II, that kind of a thing. The reality is that unfortunately we have still seen episodes of genocide take place since World War II ended. In the early 1990s, after the breakup of the Soviet Union, down in the Balkans, we had areas as countries that had been formerly communist government became independent. We had fighting that broke out between some of these countries when we look down in Kosovo and Bosnia, Serbia, and those areas. And there were episodes of what was called ethnic cleansing, where some of the Christian forces from some countries were rounding up and killing Muslims because of their religion. All right, no other real reason, but because of their religion. They wanted to cleanse their territory of anyone except for people who believed in their form of religion. And you ended up with people being rounded up in large numbers and executed. Numbers that aren't going to necessarily challenge, the Holocaust and some of those numbers kind of from World War II, but still, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of lives that were ended during that episode before the United Nations and NATO kind of stepped in to gain control over things. Also in the 1990s was a genocide episode that took place in the African country of Rwanda, where the African people, basically two different ethnicities within the Rwandan population, one basically went to war with the other. And this has had a little bit some connections to imperialism back when Rwanda was a Belgian colony. They had favored one ethnic group within the native population. When they left, the other group wanted to get even. Bottom line, by the time that genocide ended, roughly 1 million Rwandans, men, women, and children had been killed before control kind of gained over the situation. And so even going into the 21st century, we have still seen examples of genocide. Also in Africa, in the Sudan civil war that breaks out, and a death toll that probably by now is well over 200,000, and then millions of people basically made to be refugees because of just trying to get out of the way of the genocide that's going on there and the warfare. And so again, as much as we want to believe that there was going to be never again. Unfortunately, those are three quick examples. The world, as each of these genocide events has taken place, the world knew what was going on. It was being reported, and the world response was, like it says there, little to nothing. Some have suggested that with some of those genocides happening in Africa, that the role of race or racism might have come into play. Some people have suggested that even some of religious discrimination, maybe in the Balkans, with Bosnia and some of the genocide that takes place there, and so those kinds of things to get involved. But bottom line is that unfortunately, genocide seems to be this element of mass atrocity that seems like it is kind of sort of here to stay, as the little cartoon down there gives examples of some other examples of mass atrocity have taken place down through the 20th century and post World War II, post Holocaust. So anyhow, that there, folks, finally gets us to the end of this epic unit. And so there you go. Got it taken care of in less than 20 minutes. Oh, goodness me. All right, that's it. And I'm not going to throw anything more at you on that for now. We're out. Bye.